This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. A new area of research is just getting started here at K-State. Nanotechnology is now being explored in entomology as a way to mitigate agricultural pests. K-State field crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth received a grant from the USDA to begin this work, as well as a new leading nanotechnology scientist to join his lab, Amie Norton. In part one of this interview, we learn how this research made its way to K-State's campus and more about Dr. Norton's background. The conversation does not end there, however. In part two of this interview delves into what Jeff and Amie hope to find in new graduate students to help with this one-of-a-kind area of research. We end with this week's Milk Lines, where K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk encourages producers to examine their current reproduction program and eliminate any missed opportunities for getting animals bred on time. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now for a special conversation on nanotechnology. It might be a new subject for some of you listening in, but it's an interesting subject for sure. And covering that today, we have with us Jeff Whitworth. He is a familiar voice here on Agriculture Today. He is our K-State row crop entomologist, as well as Amie Norton. She is our new nano specialist in entomology. So thank you both for joining us today.
Yes, our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about all things nanotechnology. And Amie, you were brought onto this team to cover exactly that. So Jeff, do you want to tell us a bit about Amie?
Yes, more than happy to. I'm not going to go into all about how this came about, but a couple of years ago, we were approached by the USDA, and I think Dr. Norton will go into this a little more, about looking at the possibility of nanoparticles, using nanoparticles and nanotechnology in integrated pest management or pest management of insects or applied pest management, whatever you want to call it. And I thought it was kind of a neat idea, maybe a neat start of looking at some research. I didn't know, and I still don't know hardly anything at all about nanotechnology, but we were fortunate, K-State was fortunate in the entomology department to get a little grant from the USDA to start a 4-year program looking at how nanotechnology may fit into agriculture, most specifically entomology or insect pest management. And just quick advertisement, we also have 2 graduate research assistantships available starting next semester in January to start doing research on this topic. I said I don't know much about this, so Dr. Norton, she was working with USDA. She's working in nanotechnology field. She's one of the, she won't say this, but she's one of the leading specialists as far as nanotechnology goes in the country. So we're very fortunate to get her. And she's joined the entomology department in last summer, and we're getting all of the equipment together to start looking at how nanotechnology may impact or may fit into the world of applied entomology. So with that, Samantha, if you don't mind, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Norton and let her tell you a little more of the specifics of nanotechnology.
Yeah, absolutely. Amie, let's start with, first and foremost, the basics. What is nanotechnology?
Thanks, Dr. Whitworth. So when people are asked what nanotechnology is, the first thing they say is something really, really small. And that's correct. But to me, the thing that blows my mind is just how small. So to put that on scale, if you think of the earth as like a meter, and then you compare it to like a tennis ball, that's what we're thinking about here. So the tennis ball would be a nanometer in that sense. And so we're talking about something comparatively really small. And so what makes something a nanotechnology is something that's small, but also its properties are different than in the small space than it is in the bulk material. An example I like to give is gold. And so everyone knows gold is yellow, right? Well, if you look at the nano gold, it's purple. And so that's kind of cool. And so I think everyone sees nano in their everyday life. They just don't realize it. So nanomaterials are in our sunscreen. It's also in our solar panels, if you have those. We're using it in cancer treatments. And if you see it, UV-protected clothing, the layer that they put there is a nano zinc oxide. And then when we talk about agricultural, we're starting to see more nano pop up there. And I think there's a lot of promise for nanotechnology to be used in agriculture. And what we're hoping for is to bring down the cost of production and then also to increase production. And I think everyone would be happy with that happening. And so how this project kind of came about is that I was working at the USDA and I made some nanomaterial out of grain. And we put silver and gold on it. We made either gold nanomaterial or silver nanomaterial. And the reason why we did that is because silver and gold is antimicrobial. And what that means is that it kills bacteria. And so then we exposed the mosquitoes to it, and it killed it at a lower rate than you see in literature. So we thought that was kind of neat. And so then we thought, can we do anything with crop pest? And so I came over here and joined Jeff's team. So we're talking about doing, continuing to work with mosquitoes because I think we all hate mosquitoes. And then we're talking about extending it to crop pest and doing some work on corn rootworms, maybe extending it to household pests and doing some work with termites as well. One thing is, why would we use nano? Why not just use the pesticides that we already have? And one concern we have is using less active ingredients, which would lower the cost. And the reason why we can do that is the nanomaterial has a larger surface area. And so we can actually apply more pesticides with less material being used.
Wow. Incredible. It's insane to hear the transition of how, this has progressed slowly over time. Obviously, you started out as a nanotechnologist with the USDA, and you discovered this by chance, through this wheat grain that you were using, and all of a sudden it turned into this. You've moved to Kansas. You're in Manhattan working on this now, working with, an entomologist, which is an area that you've learned a lot about in the most recent months. So what has that transition been like?
It's been really fun, but I have a lot to learn. So my background is in chemistry, so I'm learning a lot about insects right now, and they are really interesting. They're their own little micro world, and they're useful to our environment, but there's some of them that we don't want around so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talked about some of those there, mosquitoes being one for sure, that, like you said, they're not only a pest to us, but I think of some even the disease properties that they carry, things like that. So mitigating those would be fantastic.
Yeah, those vector pests are, they're not only a concern, they're a veterinarian concern, they're a human risk. So I looked up the most dangerous creatures, and mosquitoes were number one. So,
yeah.
Well, there are some pests also. And what she's been looking at is what she calls green technology, which is, more of an organic type culture, I guess. I think that's kind of neat because she's looking at some of the natural organic products, nicotine, tobacco, some of them that are toxic to insects, and being able to produce them with green technology, which she can explain maybe that a little bit, because that's a little more of the organic or the safer even technology looking at pesticides, because what we're trying to do is produce safer pesticides, have less problems with non-target organisms, okay, lesser amounts at cheaper price. So this green technology, I think, that's something I think we're going to look at a little bit more. And I think maybe Amie can explain that to you just a little bit.
Yeah, Amie, let's go ahead and talk through that, because like you said, this would be a whole new generation almost of pesticides available for producers, hopefully, through this work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people shy away from the word green because they think expensive, and we want it to be cheap. And so one thing we're thinking about is how are we producing this? Because right now when you make nanomaterials, you use toxic solvents. So we don't want to have a bunch of toxic solvents that later on in the production they have to throw out, or the process is not well. So we're already thinking about making everything in water, having a clean process. So when we upscale, the production is much cleaner and it's much cheaper to produce. And the other thing is that when we make our nanomaterials, we're making it out of organic waste. And so the material that we're making it out of is already cheap. And so the cost of the pesticide is already reduced.
By organic waste, you're talking about?
So things like crop waste that we would throw away, like orange peels.
A lot of food is wasted every year.
Yes.
She had a reference where, 2 million pounds of pumpkins are wasted every October. They're all harvested right around into September for Halloween. but they're not all used. Or if they are used, they're just taken out and thrown in the landfill. So Amie looked at some of the using, I shouldn't say wasted pumpkins, but some of the leftover pumpkins to see if she can make nanoparticles out of that. It seemed to work pretty well. So just, ideas like that, if we can use, something that's going to waste, that's organic, and make something useful out of it, that's really what we're trying to do in very, very, very nano-sized particles, very small particles.
Yeah, because you think about it, in October, we all carved our pumpkins, and then what did? We threw them away. So why not make something useful out of it? And so that's kind of the thinking we're going in with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Impressive for sure. And you mentioned quite a few pests there. Obviously, we've talked a bit about mosquitoes, but some of the others that you're really hoping to focus on that maybe producers tuning in are used to hearing about and having to deal with every year. What are some of those?
One is the Haitian fly. The other one is the corn rootworm. And one thing that we're thinking about doing is the seed treatment, so the plant would uptake the nanomaterial. And right now, the seed treatments, I think they last about 21 to 28 days. So with nanomaterials, what we're hoping is you can layer the nanomaterials, you can control the release, and with that, we're hoping to have more longer-lasting pesticides.
Well, Amie, that definitely sounds like innovation at its finest. We're cutting to a short break now, but we will return with more from both K-State's Jeff Whitworth and Amie Norton on nanotechnology and entomology ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today, and we're continuing our conversation now on nanotechnology with K-State field crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth and nanotechnology specialist Amie Norton. These two have collaborated with the help of a grant from the USDA to create a whole new area of research here at K-State. Nanotechnology to hopefully help with mitigating agricultural pests in the future. We continue that conversation now.
Yes, seed treatments came along like 30 years ago now, along with the BT, the genetically modified crops. And that's what we're looking at least probably in the next 20 years. We're going to lose those, and we're already losing. There's resistance to, at least in the way of corn rootworms, to all four events that are commercially available for corn. The seed treatments, they work really well, but they last 21 to 28 days. So if this nanotechnology can do what Amie was talking about, layering, where you can put, I don't even know what you call it, but a layer of nanoparticles, and they can last longer. You can extend the efficacy, the life of the nanoparticles because of layering, so that they're not, the first layer goes out after, let's say, 20 days. Second layer then is active for another 20 days, et cetera, like that. That's the kind of, at least possibilities or potential we're looking at. So when we lose BT, and I know all the companies are going, we're never going to lose it because we have different events. That's true, but every one we've ever released, there has been resistance developed. So again, we're just looking ahead to try and provide something cheap, reasonable, and safe for the agricultural producers that may take the place of seed treatments, and BT may not. We'll see. Like I said, we're just starting on the ground floor, but I think by the end of 4 years, which is the life of this original grant and our activity with USDA, I think by the end of the 4-year period, we'll have a pretty good understanding of whether there is going to be some potential or whether there's not going to be much potential. But again, we're going to look at a wide range of potential insect pests, termites and mosquitoes and corn rootworms and Hessian flies and grasshoppers. And we're looking at a whole wide range of medical veterinary pests, structural household pests, agricultural pests, the whole problem with pests. Hopefully we can at least do a cursory look at and see what screening and see if there's any potential there for nanotechnology.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting work for sure. And, you mentioned kind of the predecessors of this in a way there, the, different pesticides in and of themselves, but also, genetically modified crops and things of that nature. Have you heard any pushback consumer wise? Because I hear those things and my mind floods to consumer perceptions and concerns. But this, like you said, is a greener technology. So have you heard of any concerns over it so far?
I have not, but it's new. I mean, nobody even knows what nanotechnology is. Otherwise, they're interested in it if they have heard it, but not relative to entomology. You talk about nanotechnology or nanoparticles, you think space or, high-tech type stuff. When Amie, she was talking about right now it's used as anti-cancer products and some UV helps protect against UV radiation. Yeah, it's pretty high-tech stuff. And so hopefully that's what we're going to do is try and take some of that and bring it down. K-State and USDA has been really, really good to us in helping fund our labs. So we've kind of revamped one laboratory so we have most of the state-of-the-art equipment, I think, don't we, Amie?
Yes, we do.
I think at least we've spent quite a bit of money on equipment, of which I know not anything. But hopefully in the next year or two, we get a couple of graduate students and we can screen a lot of this material and a lot of different pests and see if there is going to be any potential. And hopefully, K-State can be in on the ground floor of developing nanotechnology relative to entomology or insect pest management. At least that's what we're looking at right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned, Amie being the specialist here and looking for graduate students to kind of continue this work. So, and those graduate students that you're hoping to kind of advertise for and get into the program, what are you looking for in those students?
Somebody a lot smarter than me and a lot harder working. No, really. In entomology, we've over the years taken in anybody with a bachelor's degree from an accredited university because there's very few universities provide undergraduate degrees in entomology. So any of the biological sciences, or any of the agricultural sciences, horticulture, and now I guess with any of the chemistries, inorganic chemistry, but a little more, I would say, the biological sciences. But, there is no requirements. Just you have to satisfy K-State graduate school requirements. You have to apply, and you have to then, if you're accepted through the graduate school, they'll send your application over to the entomology department, and they'll review it, make sure you fulfill those requirements. And then if you're interested in nanotechnology, you put that on your application, they'll send it down to us. But there's really no required undergraduate degree to go on to get a master's and or a PhD in entomology. It's just an interest really in the biological sciences or agriculture and an interest in getting an advanced degree and learning more and seriously working hard. The only two requirements I have, only two I've ever had for anybody is, you be honest and you work hard. I don't care sex, color, creed, and anything else. As long as you work hard and are honest, we'll take you.
Absolutely. And Amie, day to day, what might these students that are, prospective students potentially hoping to apply, what might they expect?
Well, I think you'll definitely be running some chemical reactions, and that might sound overwhelming, but you'll learn, and we'll make some nanoparticles, and then you'll be testing them against pests, either a crop pest or mosquitoes, and then we'll see what the efficacy is. So day to day, it'll change up a little bit depending on where you are, but at first, you'll come in and you'll learn a bit about the background of the nanotechnology and how they use the instruments.
It's mostly lab work right now.
Yeah.
We have to do a lot of screening, developing of nanoparticles. Like I said, it's just a matter of how we develop it, from what materials, what hopefully leftover food products and how that works, and screen them against insects in the laboratory. If it works well, then we may go to larger studies in the field, which is kind of the normal progression when you test insecticides or BT or any of the others. They develop stuff in the laboratory first, and if those products that work or show some promise, they move them to larger populations of the pests, which that's probably what we're going to do. But initially, it's going to be mostly the first year or two lab work. So making and screening different nanoparticles against different pests.
Absolutely. And what an opportunity for whoever these students end up being, for them to become the leaders in this field, this whole new field of science and agricultural research that's going on here, especially here at K-State.
Yes, it's, materials science and entomology at the same time.
It's the only place in the country right now. I don't want to overhype this, but if you come in, you at least be on the ground floor of starting to look at how nanotechnology may fit into entomology or integrated pest management or insect pest management, whatever you want to call it, whether it is actually going to, develop into multi-billion-dollar fields like seed treatments and GMOs, or whether we're going to say, no, there's no place there for it. I think by the end of 4 years, we'll probably have an idea about that. And that's what we're shooting for.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to the conversations to come revolving around your all research. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out, and I know listeners will be tuning in and looking forward to it for sure.
Well, I'll be happy to come over and talk bugs. This is the last time I'm going to talk nano stuff because I don't know anything about it, but that's why we have Dr. Norton.
I'll look forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for both of your time today. I know you two are extremely busy, especially with, like you said, setting up that lab and getting everything geared up and ready to go and recruiting, hopefully, some potential graduate students to come. But thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, that was K-State row crop entomologist Jeff Whitworth, as well as nano specialist in entomology Amie Norton, talking all things nanotechnology. As always, if you are on the go and listening to us on the radio with one of our radio station partners, and you're wanting to listen to more from Agriculture Today through the rest of today's programming, be sure to check out our podcast. We are available as a podcast anywhere podcasts can be found. Simply search for Agriculture Today, and you should find us there. So that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, once again, anywhere podcasts can be found. Be sure to give us a listen, and that's also where the show notes for today's program can also be found, with all of the available links that are discussed during today's programming. Before we cut to a short break, we'll return ahead with milk lines for the week. This week, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk joins us as always with words of advice to encourage producers to examine their own current reproduction programs and to eliminate any potentially missed opportunities for getting animals bred on time this year. Once again, we'll be back with that and more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. As Kansas dairy producers consider their reproduction programs for 2023, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk encourages them to look at the success of this year's program. In particular, try to identify and eliminate any missed opportunities for getting animals bred on time and take the necessary steps to improve heat detection rates.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning how we might improve our repro programs as we move into 2023. As you look at your cost of reproduction on your dairy farm, one of those costs is replacement heifers. How many replacement heifers are you going to need? Are you really raising more heifers than what you really need? If so, it's probably not a very profitable thing to do. Most of the time, the cost of raising replacement heifers is actually more than what it would cost to purchase them. Now, there's other reasons why we would want to raise enough replacement heifers for our own herd. So, not suggesting that you should just simply go out and purchase all of your heifers. No, that's not the case. So within our own herd and within our reproductive program, where are some places that we actually lose money when it comes to repro? Well, one of the things that we find on some farms is that we may have a plan for first service, days in milk or days of age for our cows and heifers, but how well do we execute the plan? You know, sometimes 10-15% of the heifers and cows in our herd are actually not getting bred on time. So if we're missing opportunities to get animals bred at a younger age, or at a lower days in milk just because there's some things slipping through the cracks. One of the things we can do is just close those cracks up, make sure we have procedures in plan so we catch those animals and get them on the breeding list when they should be on there. Now, heat detection rates. There's many farms out there that their heat detection rates are better than 70%. And there's various ways we get to that. So my point is here, your heat detection rate on your farm, both with cows and heifers, can exceed 70%. That ensures that we get semen into the cows that are actually cycling. We can get there by improving how we detect heat in cattle. Many people are using electronic systems and looking at activity, and it's a great way to do it. Others are still working with chalk programs and reading tail heads, and yes, that's a way that we can do that. Some people use time breeding programs and hormones to get there. So there's ways to get there. So if your heat detection rate is not 70% or greater, again, it's an opportunity on your dairy to get some increased efficiency out of your breeding program. Now, here's another thing to consider. What do you do on do not breeds? When do you make decisions that you're not actually going to breed that animal again? Well, as I think about that, and many times when I visit with dairy producers about that, the reason they put animals on do not breed list is because they have not been successful getting them pregnant during the lactation. So they reach maybe 200 or 225 days in milk, and they go on the do not breed list. So we're no longer going to breed those animals. Well, I want you to think about another thing. There are animals out there that when they calve, that you don't want to breed them for another lactation. So I'm talking about older animals, maybe a heifer that just wasn't well grown, and you're going to milk her this time, but you really don't want to keep her around in the herd. Make those decisions when those animals calve. Let's not waste any time setting them up or maybe actually breeding them if we really don't want them to stay around for another lactation. Finally, you might want to think about what do you want to invest in. Is there some technology related to the repro program that you might want to invest in? Might be something in the area of heat detection. Maybe you've thought about using activity meters or activity monitoring to try to catch animals in heat. Check out those prices. See if that's something that you think would improve the reproductive efficiency on your dairy. This has long-term benefits both to profitability as well as level of milk production in your dairy herd. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers on various ways that they could improve the efficiency of reproduction within their dairy herd.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.